Welcome to First Contact Stories of the Call Center. I'm your host, Christian Montes, where we dive into the lives that connect us all, one call at a time, revealing the stories behind the leaders' transformative journeys in the contact center world. All right, hey everyone, welcome back to First Contact Stories of the Call Center. Today's guest is actually one with a unique title. He's been called the Czar of TCPA, and for good reason. Eric J. Troutman is one of the nation's leading experts on telemarketing law, compliance, and class action defense. He's the voice behind TCPA World, a blog that has become a go-to source for anyone navigating the maze of robocall, AI-driven outreach, and obviously the patchwork of state laws, something like Florida and Texas mini TCPA. So Eric, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, man. Great to be here.
Yeah, we always start this show with kind of your origin story. How did you get into the industry, the space that you're in today? Obviously, some of us talk about how in the contact center world, we didn't wake up one day and say, hey, when I grow up, I'm going to be that. But because you're specifically in law, what did that origin story for you look like? Did you always want to be an attorney? Kind of give us that beginning.
Wow. Well, my origin story can be lengthy. I'll try to give you like the shortest version I possibly can. But yeah, I mean, to answer that question, I always wanted to be a lawyer. I always knew I was going to be an attorney. By the time I was like 5 years old, I knew I was going to do it. I assumed and believed that I'll always be like a top gun, with trial lawyer flying across the country, handling, the highest stakes cases. And turns out that's exactly, you dream it and then you build it. And here we are. So I did not go to law school, though, to do TCPA work. Never heard of it. I was a trial attorney, tried a bunch of jury trials, high stakes stuff, really loved it. And then one of my big clients, Wells Fargo, got hit with the TCPA class action. At the time, I hadn't done complex litigation, didn't know what the TCPA was. This was back in 2008, by the way. So we're talking 17 years ago. But the lead at Wells Fargo said, look, you're a smart guy, you figure it out. Very quickly, I became their national counsel for all their TCPA work. Then I was national counsel for U.S. Bank and Ally Financial. And before I knew it, I was the most experienced TCPA defense lawyer on the planet. At that point, it was a pretty easy course to become the czar of the TCPA. And now I've been lead counsel in about 1,000 class litigation matters and over 2,000 individual suits, and manage massive portfolios of litigation and really take care of everybody in the industry. The lead gen side is kind of new to me. I mean, I've only been doing that for about 4 or 5 years, so I guess that's relatively new. But I mean, this is where so many of the lawsuits come from, right? Is this industry, quote unquote, generating leads, which is really kind of generating trouble for the lead buyers. And so I mostly represent the lead buyers. I try to help the lead sellers to understand what they're doing wrong, and by and large, take care of everyone in the industry if I can.
I kind of want to go back to this concept of you wanting to be a lawyer. What was it in the early stage where you said it was like 5 years old? You're like, what was that moment where you're just like, that's what I want to be? I get that it's been forever, but was there a moment in time where you said, hey, that's the kind of job that I want?
It probably evolved over time. I can't tell you what like the original formative concepts were, but I can tell you by the time I was probably 15 or 16, I had a very clear vision that the law was what I wanted to be a part of. Building the law, building society was important to me. And the concept of objective truth was very important to me. And when you're an attorney, right, your job is to help people to see the truth. At least I believe that. I guess not every lawyer subscribes to that, but I do. And the ability to take your client's position, understand the facts, understand the application of the law, and then you get to step into a courtroom. So I love trial. And when you're in that trial, right, those 12 members of the jury are going to determine the truth of a matter. And there's only 2 people that get to talk to them about it, you and the other side. I love that idea. I love being the voice of truth. I love being able to take my client and speak for them and help the jury to understand what the truth ultimately is. And, I've got an incredible track record of winning. And the reason that I win is not because I'm so clever or smart. It's because I align with the truth. I never go in and tell the jury anything but the truth. So what does that mean? It means if my case is sucky, we're going to settle that case. I'm not going to go to trial with some bullshit case. But if you see me in trial, we're going to win. And there's no way that we're not going to win. And so anyway, that concept of being able to elucidate the truth, identify the truth, and bring it forth very important to me, at least, again, by the time I was 15, 16. What I was thinking when I was 5 years old, I have no idea. But I do know that my entire life, that's what I wanted to do. And here I am.
So, there's a lot of times when people go into law, there's a lot of different avenues, and you've talked about kind of your journey into how you got into TCPA. But not everybody who practices law has a law firm, right? They all end up in different avenues working for another company or for a law firm, or they're inside counsel and so on and so forth. When did you decide, or how did you go about saying, from a business perspective, that you had the ability to create a law firm and run a business versus being a portion of a business? Was there anything that kind of went into that mindset of that decision making?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'm a huge coward. I'm gonna let you just know this. This is true. I've got kids. At the time I was married, when I was in big law, I hated my life in big law. I hated it, but it was safe, right? I could make 7 figures for the rest of my life just doing what I do. Miserable though, because there's so much nonsense that goes on there. It's just so inefficient. The clients get treated so poorly, and just everything's bad. There's like literally, I've never worked or heard of an industry or an institution where just everything is done the wrong way, and yet it just muddles on, right? But that's big law. Everything's done the wrong way. So I wanted out of there so bad that, like, I can't even tell you. And it was my friends, it was Pooja, really, and my buddy PJ, who were just in my ear constantly, like, God, like, Eric, you're miserable, like, get out of there, get out of there, get out of there. But because I was paralyzed by fear. What if I go out and the clients don't come? What if I can't make a living? What if, like, my kids can't eat? I know it's just like preposterous fears, preposterous. But this is what kept me kind of in the position that I was in. But it's like anything else. Like, once you take that leap, like once you have committed, well, now you got to go guns blazing, right? Now failure is not an option. I've got a sign, in my house office that says failure is not an option. And that's how it is. Now you have to do everything. You have to work 18 hours a day to make sure you don't fail. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're in that, we're not quite a startup anymore at Troutman, Amin. I think we're fairly well established, but we're still early on the curve. We're still kind of, putting in as much elbow grease as we possibly can to lay the foundation that we're going to need. I mean, we're trying to build something that's going to last 1,000 years, right? So we're definitely putting in the work now. But it was my friends. I mean, it was Pooja and PJ in particular. I'll just name them, that gave me the strength and, the confidence to do what probably I would have never done otherwise. I would have just sat there my whole career in big law and been miserable, but been safe, right? And there you go.
It's interesting how a lot of the stories evolve around having some form of support, right? Somebody there or some group of people that have kind of encouraged you or been there for advice. And when it comes to having your own business, right, and you've made that decision to take those skill sets and remove yourself from that just environment where you're like sick of working in that environment, but you knew you loved the law. Were there any surprises or things that were harder, easier than you thought when you actually created the company, when you started running a company and had to do all the stuff that it takes to run a business versus just focusing on the law piece? Was there anything that came to mind that you're just like, wow, this was actually a lot easier than I thought, or like, oh, hey, I didn't realize I had to do this, or this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be?
A lot of surprises, pretty much all positive, I got to tell you. The first surprise was that all my clients came. I don't know why that was surprising to me. But it was. I was so happy, I still am so incredibly grateful that, every single one of my clients just came right along. And most of them said words to the effect of, it's about damn time, right? And that was amazing. And then I was surprised by, how easy it was to give them great results and to build out a fantastic team. I mean, really, backing up, this whole experience has taught me a lot about, the concept. I'm trying to think of what the right word would be. Fate might not be the right word, but the concept of just kind of like trusting that the universe is going to take care of you, right? Like, if you work really, really hard and you treat people the right way and you're generous and you're grateful, like, it's going to work out, right? And I have experienced that firsthand on a level that, I mean, it's beyond just like words and conjecture. Like, I know that I am a clever guy and a smart guy, but there's no way I could have built the team that I built if it was just Eric Troutman on his own. somebody's looking out for me up there and looking out for Pooja and making sure that we've got just the most incredible people at our side because we've got a purpose, man. Like this is bigger ultimately, I think, than just being a law firm. This is going to end up being a force, I think, in the community and in broader society because we're trying to build that. So, what I have been continuously surprised by is just how incredibly successful this rocket ship has been, despite the fact that I truthfully have no idea what I'm doing, right? And yet we just keep winning and building and growing, and more clients are coming in, and the brand is so incredibly strong, and we've got the reach, right, organization, and essentially the entire industry backing us. It's just been an incredible, incredible ride. And obviously all of that is built on a foundation of 20 years I've been doing this and all the contacts. And, I've done a fantastic job of networking. I'm not going to lie, right? I'm a decent marketer. So I've got some basic skill sets that have helped us to be successful. But that's just kind of, the base level, right? So much of the building and what's gone up around us, I can't take credit for. But I'm so grateful and so blessed and so lucky that it's just working out the way that it is.
It's interesting about from the very first time I ever saw and met you and your growing team is what you do around branding, right? The brand of the logo, the way that you dress, the way that you have the czar, all these things, people remember the brand, they remember you and your team. And what I think is different is you do a lot of blogs, a lot of videos, a lot of live commentary. You really have kind of driven out of this traditional role of just legal this department or it's just this business and call us when you have a problem. And, you know us because of our reputation, but you have this much greater public facing role. Was that always part of your personality or the brand? Or was this something that you had to step out of your comfort zone and go like, I have to find a way to be memorable or to get something out there? Like, kind of talk to me about how did you get into this approach of how you brand your business and even your personal brand?
Well, let me start by explaining the kind of the concept, and I'll explain how I got into it, right? So the concept to me is pretty straightforward, right? People want a differentiator. If you're going to choose a law firm, like which law firm are you going to pick? So I want to demonstrate, because it's factually true, that we know more than anybody else. So how do I demonstrate that? Well, I just share a bunch of content, right? Here it is. Look, use your own eyes. See it for yourself. I'm not telling you that I know more than other lawyers. I'm showing you, right? I'm not telling you that we're more talented. I'm showing you that talent. I'm going to take my team, right? A bunch of killers. Some of these are younger kids. Some of these are very experienced lawyers. I'm going to put them out on video. There's no scripts. We're not reading off of something like every other law firm does, right? They sit there and they prepare and they have it vetted and they have it double checked and triple checked because they're so afraid of looking dumb, because guess what? They are, right? You take talented people, they're not afraid of it because they're talented. You put them up there and they're going to put on a great show for people. So to me, my entire concept around putting out content, both video engagement and any other form of content, is I know my people are better, smarter, sharper. I know we've spent more time than they have. We're not pretending to be something that we're not. We're just demonstrating exactly who we are. So we put that out there. Obviously, it's going to be well received, right? So we do this without fear. That's like the primary differentiator, is that all these other law firms, they're just paralyzed by fear. They have no sense of identity and they have no concept of talent, true talent. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Right? This made me uneasy initially, right? Like every other lawyer, when I first, became kind of more experienced, right? As a young lawyer, you're not thinking about branding, right? You're thinking about just trying to be a good lawyer. And then, when I was probably about like a fifth or sixth year attorney, I tried a bunch of cases. I was very successful, and it was very clear to me at least, that I was much better than regular attorneys. In my mind, it was like, well, word will get out. People will just know that I'm a better lawyer. No, seriously, this is what people think. This is what I thought, right? Just somehow people will just know that I'm a better lawyer. And of course, that's not the way it worked. Now, people who did know I was a great lawyer were the people I was trying cases for, Wells Fargo, right? And that did lead, as I told you before, to like my first kind of entree into the TCPA and into complex litigation. And it did lay the foundation. So in a weird way, I was kind of right. When you are a great attorney and you are doing great results, it can lead without any marketing, without any, deliberate public facing efforts. It can lead to success. And it was leading to success. But ultimately, when I first started building a team, right, the first time I hired someone, I remember who she was, and I just thought, wow, this person has literally just put their career in my hands. And it was like very invigorating for me. I was like, I can't fail, not for myself, but like this person is trusting me. And then as I built out more people, and as I started building out a team in big law, it was very different, because most of the time when you're in big law, these associates are working for all the different lawyers. They get really no great experience. They don't get any great, specialization. As a result, they end up not being great lawyers and end up most of the time getting kicked out. That's how big law works. But in my environment, I had people that were dedicated just to me, which the other partners didn't like, by the way, but I did it anyway, because and so I was like, I can't let these people fail. And then, after, because big law works the way it works, I got stabbed in the back a few times. Then it became, well, I can't let those other people succeed, right? And so with each kind of new level of motivation, it gave me a new level of energy to, strip off whatever quote unquote dignity there was, whatever like was holding me back, whatever fear, whatever sense of, potential embarrassment. Oh God, I can't, what if people don't like me? It was kind of like, I don't care. Like, we've got to go scorched earth. We can't hold anything back, because either I've got to make sure the people who are loyal to me are succeeding, and the people who are disloyal to me, I don't want them to fail, but I don't want them to have any more cases ever again. Not in my territory. Go do something else, right? So, I'm very blessed in the sense that I'm easily motivated. I'm very blessed in the sense that I've got a great work ethic. And of course, I'm very blessed in the sense that we're pretty talented and we're not afraid to display it.
A famous African proverb says that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. At NobelBiz, we have made it our mission to travel far and wide with our partners and clients. As a complete telecom services provider with over 20 years of experience in the industry, NobelBiz offers the only voice carrier network designed with the sole purpose of serving call centers around the world. This contact center dedicated carrier network provides crystal clear voice traffic, up-to-date compliance tools, intelligent routing, and highly secure data protocols combined with 99.9% uptime and easy setup. Our goal for 2022 is to become the ultimate partner and provider for the contact center industry by placing service quality at the top of our priority list. To top it off, at NobelBiz we have the most competitive cost per minute model in the industry. Need proof? Reach out to us and learn more about the NobelBiz voice carrier network at www.nobelbiz.com.
Yeah, I think that confidence, right? And that line of fear of what other people will think, or whether you'll fail, or whether or not it's something you can't come back from, those balancing acts that people make, and they just don't actually dive all in and say, I have to give everything. You had that motivation of, I can't fail for me. I have to, this person's life is in my hands, and embracing that dynamic when you hire people and work with people is probably not always common, right? It's what's part of my job, and it's just, I do these things, but I don't know that people take it to that extreme. And so with that said, to kind of pivot a little bit, Eric, I know you've dealt with big enterprises and just like the scrappy startup. When you engage those types of businesses over your career, how different are the challenges from a compliance perspective between those two worlds? And are there any blind spots that you see often happening between those two worlds?
Oh man, the blind spots run the gambit, right? I mean, human beings are built full of blind spots. I mean, we don't understand ourselves. We don't know why we sleep. We don't know what motivates us 98% of the time. We don't know why we want the things that we want, right? So we're just riddled with blind spots. And institutions, just being, things built out of people, are riddled with blind spots even worse. Now, when you've got a startup, generally speaking, not always, generally speaking, these people know that they don't know anything, right? They're coming to you, they're blank slate, they're putty in your hands, they're going to listen to what you have to say. I actually like working with startups because, you can take a company and you can really add to their valuation, right? I mean, I've got one guy that was like, man, you've added like $200 billion to my valuation just, from working with me. I'm like, yeah, well, happy to do that because you listened, right? You took what I told you to do, and then you did it, and now you're scaling it, and wow, look at that. It's like working and successful and attractive to people in the market. Great. Working with enterprise, it can be frustrating. And not even because the people that you're dealing with at the enterprise aren't listening or willing to listen, but because they are working on so many layers, right? And they're just many times siloed, or even if they're not siloed, even if they have ultimate responsibility, trying to get through all the different layers of people to get action can be very, very challenging. And so you might work 60 hours putting together a set of recommendations for a great enterprise, and you've got like a really good solution built up. You're going to help them operationalize it, and you're going to hold their hands, and you're going to go through with their software engineers. You're going to get it all done for them. And then 3 weeks later, it's just lost momentum, and it kind of goes into the ether. And it's like, well, what the hell happened there? Right. And it's like, oh, well, this other exec had some other priority, and then this team got reorganized, and the project was going over there. And so enterprise, it's really, really tough, I have found, to see a project go all the way through when it's a major project. Now, there's been exceptions. Like I remember I did Wells Fargo's like enterprise TCPA, did something for US Bank, and they saw it through and they made massive changes. And you'll notice that, they don't get sued anymore, right? But other institutions, enterprise, many times you find that they're, a writhing coil of impulse, right? Some people want to do one thing, other people want to do another thing. And if you can't get that critical mass, they might have the buy-in to retain us, to have us come in, but ultimately they don't have the buy-in to actually get stuff done. And that can be a little frustrating, but I guess at the end of the day, I'm doing my job and they're doing their job. Everybody's just going to end up where they end up. But just in terms of flat blind spots, I have found that enterprise usually doesn't have true blind spots. They just have a blind eye sometimes, if you know what I mean.
It's interesting you say that, because a lot of times in the companies, regardless of what they're adopting, whether it's a technology, a process, if it's, compliance, you said something earlier about having the buy-in or having the change at some point above of their directive and initiative towards certain projects and things they want to get done. In one moment, it's the shiny object has to get done. Something's driving that. And then all of a sudden, some other thing happens. I know in the tech side, if you don't get your champion, you don't get the people that own getting this thing done and done right by a certain time, it just never gets done. On your end, when you're looking at compliance, which many times is driven by either pain because they got sued for something, or they saw someone else get sued and they're like, oh crap, I don't want to get sued next because I got deep pockets. When you're the enterprise, how do you see the drive between actually getting things done culturally as a business, saying we need to own this, get it done, versus it's just the next shiny object. And then when it's not shiny anymore, it's like, it's not a problem anymore. How do you get companies to actually be engaged consistently versus just, or is it just shiny object syndrome?
Well, I think you nailed it with that word culture. Right. And, enterprises have the toughest time maintaining a culture because they're big, right? Troutman Amin is small. We have a culture. We are a cult, right? Because we are so uniformly focused on singular objectives. We put feelings aside and we just kill, right? All day long, we just kill. As we get bigger, I know it's going to be harder and harder to maintain that culture. And one day when we have 5,000 employees, there's no way, right? There's just no way that you can keep that going. So when you've got an enterprise, they don't even have a culture, generally speaking. And if they do, the culture is never going to be wrapped around compliance. So the best that you could hope for is that enterprise is heavily regulated or takes regulation seriously, probably not culturally, not in their veins, but, at least conceptually, yeah, we got to be compliant, right? That's the best you can hope for. Again, what's usually happening because these enterprises are so large is that you've got individual people, right? You got individual people and they are like, wow, this is important. I want to comply. I want to make sure that my, business unit is complying, that the people I'm reporting to are complying, that, the people that I'm responsible for are complying. They will take initiative and they, generally speaking, have enough, right? Like you said, ownership champion, that they can be able to deliver something. And in my case, that something is bringing in Troutman Amin to do a review, doing some work. Now, whether or not everything ever gets done and things get completely cleaned up, that's where I have found it takes more than just one or two people to be committed. The institution has to have that complete buy-in. Or really, the institution has to have a strong enough legal department, right, or compliance department that these guys actually have power over the business leads. And many times I have found the business leads, will say, hey, look, business takes priority. And when these guys get hammered and sued and then, they get deposed and the question is, well, why did you do X, Y, or Z? It gets real hard to answer those questions. But by the same token, again, I'm not here, as an attorney, especially as outside counsel, I'm not here to make these determinations for people, right? My job is to tell you what the law is and to give you insights and the ability to execute strategies that will comply with the law while hopefully creating as little drag on your business as possible, right? That's my job. If I give you these options, if I give you these recommendations and you choose not to take them, okay, right? Like, I don't care, to be honest with you. I really don't. I will defend you if you then get sued, and I will tell you with a wagging finger, I told you so, but your decision is your decision, right? And it's not ultimately my decision. And, I came to become very comfortable with that kind of early in my career because I know what my role is. I know what my job is. I'm counsel. I'm an advisor, right? You go to a marriage counselor and the marriage counselor tells you to stay together. You don't have to just because he tell you to, right? And it's the same thing with an attorney, right? You talk to me, I'm going to tell you what I think you should do. You don't have to do it. And I definitely don't take it personally if you don't. In fact, it generally just makes me more money down the line. So,
because at that point, they'll definitely need you. So, we talked about litigation. We talked about, the concept of sometimes that's just a driver. People are avoiding it or actually in it and need it, the help. So we're seeing a lot of TCPA litigation this year, especially trending versus last year. What are you seeing is driving this massive surge? And, what can you tell us about what is the state of companies that want to continue to do outreach, but, maintain compliance?
Yeah, so this is, without question, the highest year in history for TCPA class action filings. And it's not even close because last year was the highest year ever for TCPA class action filings. And this year we're up almost 100%. We're up like 94% from last year. So it's basically double. That's crazy. Right. And a couple of things are driving this. One is there was a huge portfolio of cases that was filed on these quiet hour, text message, just bogus trash, just north of frivolous, maybe even frivolous litigation being brought by a shop out in Florida. And that bumped up the number some. But even without that portfolio, you're still talking about, 70% increase. And what's driving that, truthfully, is that there's just so much money in the TCPA. Right? I mean, this is a business. It's a business just like your business. And like any business, what do you want to do with your business? You want to scale, right? And that's what the plaintiffs' lawyers are doing. They are scaling. You've got new entrants coming into the market who are also bringing these lawsuits. And you guys should think about litigation as a market, right? Got new entrants coming into the market. The barriers to entry are high, but, because it's a very sophisticated area of the law, very high stakes, and you've got, some very sophisticated attorneys on the defense side. So there are barriers to entry. But people are willing to take their shot. They're willing to file a bunch of suits and try to learn. But then you also have the established players now who have their business models. It's working for them and they're scaling, right? And so you got the Anthony Peronics of the world filing more suits than ever before. A boss filing more suits than ever before. One guy who's not scaling is Greenwald. He's out fishing. But like a lot of these guys are just ramping up their practice. And as a result, you've got a really interesting new kind of flavor, if you will, of TCPA litigation, where it's really running the gambit in a way it hasn't in a few years. For the last few years, it's basically just been like the pros in there, right? I mean, it's like the ultimate, most dangerous place to litigate because it's like multi-billion-dollar complex litigation in federal court, and all the guys bringing the cases more or less were like pros. Now it's interesting because for the first time in a few years, you've got new entrants, and some of these guys don't know what the hell they're doing. Right? So it's an interesting opportunity. If you hire the right defense lawyer, you can pick on some of these new, less experienced, I won't say bad, but less experienced lawyers and get some good case law, get some cases that find, for instance, your system's on ATDS or find that your policies are compliant. And, it's actually an interesting opportunity to get yourself a shield that you can use in future cases or protect yourself from being sued again. So there's a little bit of opportunity actually in this huge increase in filings. But it is definitely something that everyone needs to be aware of, right? There's no hiding right now. If you're in the lead gen space, if you're buying leads, call center, even if you're a platform, hell, even if you're a carrier, right? And I don't mean like insurance carriers, I mean telecom carriers. Everyone's getting sued right now, and everyone's in the FTC and the FCC's glare as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about the whole end-to-end ecosystem of providers, from the actual call centers to the platforms to even the telecom providers. All are in the chain of, being targets. And whether it's legitimate or not, right now you need to be able to find a way to be defensible. And so with that said, when you look at what companies should be doing right now, if you're in that space, how should they be looking at this from the perspective of how do they look internally to their business to try to figure out how to protect themselves?
Well, I think it comes down to, first, understanding this is critical, right? It's just like that mind shift that people need to have. I mean, it's like there's like the converted and the non-believer out there, right? The converted understand that the TCPA is probably the biggest threat to their business that exists. Forget competition, right? Forget anything else. It's like, if you don't get it right, if you're in the call center game, a lead gen game, if you don't get that right, that's the end of your business, right? I mean, I can't tell you right now. It's like at least once a month, I have somebody on the phone telling me, well, I have to declare bankruptcy. Quote, I have to declare bankruptcy. And it's like, well, then why did you get yourself into this situation, right? But anyway, so then you have the non-believers, the people that are like, Troutman, what the hell is he talking about? What does he know? And, they just don't want to take it seriously until they get sued. And then they have to take it seriously. So what I would encourage people who maybe, haven't received the gospel yet, haven't accepted it into their hearts just yet, to understand is that this is the single biggest cash cow in the history of the plaintiff's bar. The plaintiff's lawyers have made more money off the TCPA than any other statute. And they are coming out guns blazing every day with more cases. If you are in this industry, you are going to get sued. It's not like a question, right? And please don't believe, right, that this echo chamber narrative that I heard so many times in the lead gen space that, these are just trolls and you can settle them for $2,500 or $5,000. Maybe that was true 6, 7, 8 years ago. That is not true today. And you get sued by Pironic, it's not $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. If you're getting out for under $100K, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And many times they're not letting you out, right? Like that's the key. They're going to keep you in that class action and push you all the way. And there's personal liability, for goodness sake. So the first thing people should be thinking about is, I got to take this seriously, right? Once you have that mind shift change, right? And then all of a sudden you've got that critical eye where you can start looking at your operations. Some of this is non-intuitive for sure, but some of it is intuitive. And the most low-hanging fruit stuff tends to be fairly intuitive. I mean, obviously, if you're doing cold calling, you're in harm's way, right? If you are buying a huge number of third-party leads or transfers without vetting your vendors, you're just looking to get yourself killed, right? If you are a platform that's not doing KYC, if you're a carrier that's not doing KYC, you're just looking to get yourself killed, right? And again, this is just low-hanging fruit things. But if you really want to take it seriously, obviously you need to start educating yourself because, again, whereas the low-hanging fruit stuff is kind of obvious, there is an entire, industry of plaintiffs lawyers coming after you for the stuff that's not obvious. There are incredibly nuanced rules here. They move incredibly quickly. There's tens of thousands of pages of content just on TCPA World breaking down the nuance of this law, this area of law. And again, with exposure into billions of dollars, if you get it wrong, you can't take this stuff lightly. So again, you want to start at your beginnings, right? Use your eyes and look around at what you're doing and think, what's the big obvious stuff that I might want to get checked on? But then use that as momentum to, retain somebody. Maybe not me because I'm expensive as hell. Plus I'm really busy. Doesn't mean I don't love you. It just, it is what it is. But if you want to retain, cool, give me a call. But retain somebody that knows what they're doing, right? Don't go hire like the regular lawyer that you use for your corporate work or your neighbor who's an attorney and does, family law or something. Don't go to big law, because big law will tell you, oh yeah, I've got a guy, he's great. This guy has never done this before. If he's done it like 2 or 3 times, and the guy who's selling him is going to get a cut of the fee, right? And that's how big law works. And people really need to talk about this more. You go to big law because you've got a securities lawyer and he's really good. And maybe he is really, really good at securities, right? And then you're like, hey, I've got a TCPA case, and trust me, and every big law firm, trust me, they're going to tell you, oh, they've got a guy, right? They've got a guy. And what they don't tell you is that if you hire their guy, the securities lawyer is going to get a third of the fees that you pay that guy. It's going to go straight to his pocket, right? Because it's like this huge commission system at big law that nobody talks about, right? Nobody talks about that. You want to call it a kickback, call it whatever you want, but that's how the model works, right? Your lawyer is incentivized to sell somebody else at his firm and tell you how great he is. And that is what gets people into the biggest trouble, is they fall for this stuff, which I don't blame them, right? They're trusting their lawyer. There's plenty of conflict of interest. It's undisclosed. It's bad. The state bar should shut this stuff down. I don't know why they don't. But they get themselves in trouble hiring big law attorneys who really don't know what they're doing. So go out there and make sure that you find somebody who does this TCPA for a living. Don't go hire somebody that does other stuff and is just going to try to figure it out for you. No, don't do that. They're going to ChatGPT something, and it's not going to work out. Okay. Find someone who knows what they're doing. It's not legal advice, but that is my practical advice to every single person hearing my voice. Find someone who knows what they're doing.
So talking about things around topics that one would know really well, talk to me about how courts have recently held cell phones being considered residential lines for do not call purposes. Obviously there's a lot of longstanding assumptions around this dynamic. What kind of practical impact, does this type of ruling apply to like the contact center CX space when we're talking about outbound?
Yeah, so that definition comes in the TCPA's D&C rules, right? Under the TCPA, hopefully you guys all know, there's 2 sets of rules. One is the regulated technology provisions, and one is the D&C provisions. Under the D&C provisions, right, you cannot make an unsolicited telephone call for marketing purposes to a residential subscriber. That is the language. Since time immemorial, since the dawn of time.
In the beginning.
That word came out poorly. The FCC has held since 2003, in all seriousness, that a residential subscriber includes a cell phone subscriber who uses the cell phone for personal purposes. And the courts were bound to follow that ruling. And so there are many, many, many rulings to that effect. Now, that all changed with the Supreme Court's ruling in the case called McKesson, where they threw out something called the Hobbs Act, which was the law that required courts to follow the FCC's edicts. So now, since just about 3 months ago, the courts don't have to follow the FCC's requirements anymore, and so they are free to disregard the FCC's finding that residential subscriber includes cell phones when they're used for personal use. But there's inertia there, right? So the first few cases that I've looked at it, now there's been 4, all of them brought to you by Big Law, by the way, and they've lost all 4. And the courts have found that a cellular phone is a residential line because the words are, line aren't actually in there. It's residential subscriber is in there. And they figure, hey, look, if I'm using my phone at my house, then I'm a residential subscriber. What they're overlooking, of course, is that phones aren't tied to residences. Phones that are cell phones are mobile, right? They are used everywhere. And so I think there's a very good argument to be made. It hasn't been made by Big Law, but a very good argument to be made that residential subscriber must mean a subscriber to something that is tied to a residence. We're talking about a cellular phone that is tied to nothing. It floats around in the whole wide world. And the statute doesn't say personal use or consumer use, and other statutes do say that. So Congress knows how to dictate consumer usage versus non-consumer usage when that's what it intends. It didn't. It said residential, ties back to legislative history, concern about activities in the home. That is the argument that should be being made, right? Not the argument that Big Law is making, of course. And the phenomenon here is just actually something pretty funny on my podcast. Deserve to Win, episode 35, we had Anthony Veronic, the Wolf, on, and he basically admitted that the plaintiff's bar doesn't bring these cases against Troutman Amin's clients, right? They will dismiss the case if we're involved. They'll find the lawyers that they think are less likely to be successful with their arguments, generally big law, and push them. And that's what they're doing, right? The plaintiff's bars are very, very smart. They know how to find the right plaintiffs, right defense lawyers, the right jurisdiction, the right judges to make their arguments. And so they keep winning. And, in fairness, it's easier for them, right? Because they're just representing people. And they just tell the person, hey, just dismiss your case, right? The defense attorneys don't always have that option, right? If I'm representing a company, it's not like I can be like, oh, well, just write them a big check and settle the case. You kind of got to fight them where you find yourself. That's not the case for the plaintiff's bar. So they do have that tactical advantage, but man, strategically they operate as, they hunt in packs. They really do try to find the strongest cases against the weakest opponents in order to make law. And they're doing it right now with that residential cell phone subscriber issue.
Running a contact center these days takes a great deal of courage and fortitude. NobelBiz would like to salute the contact center community for not giving up and working hard to drive their businesses down the road to success. As the promise keepers of the industry, our goal was to provide one of the most versatile and cost-efficient omni-channel solutions on the market. NobelBiz Omni Plus is a cloud contact center software that gives instant access to a full range selection of channels, from voice calls, two-way SMS, email, WhatsApp, Twitter, Telegram, among others. Our solution offers complete control over the externalities by switching from an on-premise technology to a cloud-based solution in just a matter of hours. Get integrated compliance support, advanced reporting, seamless agent and supervisor dashboards, and many more performance-enhancing capabilities, all in just one product. NobelBiz Omni Plus, the future-proof solution for scaling contact center operations. Learn more about NobelBiz Omni Plus at www.nobelbiz.com.
That whole concept of going after weak points, areas where there's the highest likelihood of a win, and avoiding areas where, it's probably unlikely. There's just so many parallels in life that applies to. And with the amount of volume that we're seeing this year, the cracks in the armor, when you talk about building a shield around yourself, you can just see all these paths of where this comes into play. So it's interesting to see how, as much as one could say I'm doing right versus, I'm not involved enough to know if I'm doing right, there's obviously a group of people that are focused on exploiting all those avenues of where they know they can enter. And so with that said, you've also talked about, coverage around the Shell Fuel Rewards SMS case, and you kind of highlighted how seemingly harmless loyalty programs can now trigger this huge TCPA exposure. Can you kind of provide some lessons learned from those types of cases?
Well, I mean, it's a very common fact pattern right now. In fact, I think the most common fact pattern is like lead gen, right? Just leads to class litigation. Probably the second most common right now are these loyalty programs, right? Because these big retailers will have sometimes millions of people, certainly hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, who have enrolled at some point. And what I've found is that many of these brands, even big brands, folks you've heard of, have a tough time proving consent because, they've got all these call to action displays. They've got, 1,000 commercials. They've got it on pizza boxes. They've got it on billboards. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you track when that person has used a keyword to come into your text program? How do you track that they actually accept they gave you express written consent? How do you demonstrate a signature, which is what's required, right, for express written consent? And then what's actually driving litigation right now is less consent issues, which are a problem, but more the DNC issues, right? So you've got, quiet hour litigation. We'll put that aside because I don't consider that to be real litigation. I consider that to be a shakedown scam. But what you are seeing is, stop notifications that are going unheeded. And increasingly now, following the April ruling from the FCC, right, you don't have to just use the word stop or quit or end. you can say something like, I don't want to hear from you anymore. Knock it off. Leave me alone, right? Free form messages that, if you're a judge, you know what that means, right? Cease and desist. Leave me the hell alone. That's pretty clear. This person is asking you not to communicate with them anymore. But guess what? The Twilios of the world aren't picking that up, right? So you, as a retailer, have to be able to honor imperfect stops. And these retail brands with these big text programs, increasingly, they're having a tough time with it. I mean, Albertsons just settled a case for $6 million that was 100% tied to failing to stop messages that were being received by consumers who were in their text book, right? So this is it's a serious issue for retailers and really for anyone that's using a recurring text program to make sure that you're honoring those stops and, of course, documenting your consents on the front end.
Yeah, it seems like low-hanging fruit, right? That you have a way to track and you have a way to figure out what you're tracking is holistic enough to encompass all the things that are there. But it sounds like it's a problem, and it sounds like enough companies haven't figured it out. And with that said, things that people are still trying to figure out, AI is everywhere. Everyone's talking about AI. Everyone's talking about how it's going to impact the contact center world, but also globally, other roles and jobs. And obviously, we've seen AI talked about of how it'll impact the law and how people actually run the work of being an attorney. We've seen it bad and good. I think you referenced it earlier, just using ChatGPT in hopes that it'll do good for you. But what are you seeing both in the contact center space of how AI is going to be implemented and potentially what kind of stuff people should be concerned about from a compliance perspective, but also even just in your own world, where are you seeing AI, being adopted or misused when it comes to the law?
Well, I'll start with the law, right? In my view, AI has absolutely no place in the law. Any attorney, any law firm that's using AI is going to get destroyed. You're going to get smoked because you're going to lose. Ultimately, clients are not paying you to take the easy way out. They're paying you for judgment. They're paying you to use your best efforts to deliver them a win. If you're abdicating any of your job as an attorney, any of your judgment, any of your wisdom, any of your experience, and just trusting an AI platform, and you just sold your soul to the devil, and you're going to lose. And I'm going to make sure you lose because my firm will never, ever, not one time use AI. And I love it that like Latham & Watkins just went out and like deployed generative AI for all of their lawyers and all their legal professionals to allow them to do briefing and legal research with it. Disgusting. Like that is the graveyard of empires. And I look forward to 5 or 6 years from now seeing that firm crumble. You brought it upon yourself. I definitely do not feel bad for you. So I think AI in the law is the biggest joke that there is. As I watch people adopt it, I laugh. I just think, well, you are obviously not smart enough to understand that you just slit your own throat and therefore don't deserve to have clients. And so I look forward to taking them. Just a matter of time. Totally different in the contact center world, though. And in many places in the broader, universe. But in a contact center, I think there's great uses for AI because unlike the law where, having deep knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and judgment is a requirement of a good attorney, that's not true for call center operators most of the time, at least not for the front end people. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to, replace some of these low-wage workers. I know it's a terrible thing to say, but I mean, it's just the truth, right? With technology that can get a better result for less money, right? And that's the key. Better results for less money is good. In the law, you're not getting better results, and you probably never will. There might come a day, 5,000 years from now when, AI can outthink and outknow really, and truthfully and outjudgment somebody, but we are nowhere near that. But we are when it comes to call center employees whose job it is to get on the phone with somebody, find out how much money they make, find out what they qualify for, and then transfer them to a loan officer or to an insurance agent for a quote, right? This is definitely something that AI can do, and frankly, better than somebody who is just a low-wage employee. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And then there's lots of opportunity for targeting and scoring and data analysis as well, right? From a compliance standpoint, currently today, as I see her talking to you on, in August of 2025, there are no disclosure requirements around the use of outbound AI. But that is likely to change. In the voice channel, there is in the chatbot, for instance, in California, That is likely to change over time. So pay very close attention. And if you want to just start adopting a program where you identify, hey, this is so-and-so, your virtual AI agent, or I'm, here to, assist you using AI to get you the best rate or whatever you want to do, you might want to think about doing it now, but you don't have to, right? But there are going to be disclosure requirements soon, pretty much nationwide, I suspect. But in terms of using AI for other purposes, if you're in a heavily regulated industry like finance, mortgage, you got to watch out for reverse redlining issues. You got to watch out for your technology, creating profiles based on protected classes. But there is a lot of really good uses for AI, particularly if you're not in a regulated industry. If you're just selling home warranties or something, you can definitely use AI to leverage to find, great folks that you might want to be contacting. So, there's a lot of opportunity. Much more, obviously, I'm just an attorney, right? I don't know the ins and outs, and I can't tell you all the brilliant deployments that AI might have, in the call center space. But I can tell you, if you're talking about outreach, right? Anytime you're talking about outreach, you got to think about TCPA issues. Anytime you're talking about modeling or scoring, you got to think about data privacy issues, right? Those are the two big things you need to think about. And of course, if you're training your model on, copyrighted works, you've got to think about copyright protection. But most of my people, and probably most of your listeners, aren't doing that. They're just basically looking at their own data sets.
What about when it comes to consent? Being able to acquire and manage consent when you're leveraging AI. Is there any concerns that you're seeing or could see as people start to adopt these technologies for acquiring and maintaining that consent?
No, AI is a great engine for obtaining consent if you can trust it, right? To me, with any Gen AI, you always have to kind of wonder, is it behaving? But assuming that you've built your model in a way where it is behaving, you can use Outbound AI in some instances to acquire consent. You have to really put a fine point on that. But I think, in text messages and in emails in particular, right, you can use AI, I think, very effectively to capture consent. And then in terms of tracking and scoring, I was talking to somebody on LinkedIn the other day, and they apparently put together some Claude agent, right? And they're buying leads, and that agent's going through from all the lead providers, and it's taking a look at the forms and seeing if the consent on the lander what it needs to be using that AI agent. I think that's fantastic. I mean, look, in theory, right, you should hire me to look at the form. Yes, in theory. But like as a lead buyer who's just trying to do, a quick and dirty, but hopefully efficient and accurate, review of the consent forms that you're buying, I think that's just brilliant. I really like that idea because, again, in theory, you should be able to program that agent to do, look for the Troutman 9, right? Look for, how close this is to, the button. What's the call to action say, right? You should be able to program this thing with, 15 or 16 specific things that it's looking for, and it should be able to give you a pretty good score, right? This is something that AI can and it should do. I think it's great. And, again, you can hire lawyers to do that. You can hire compliance professionals to do that. But it seems like AI should be able to do that for you.
Yeah. And, having those things that are very black and white, look for this, yes or no, does it have this? And you have trust that it's actually accurate and not hallucinating in those pieces, then it obviously can automate a lot of those things that, maybe don't need a human being exclusively to do. Outside of, spot checks, sanity checks, and things like that. One thing before we kind of hop to the personal stuff and close out for our conversation, you've been vocal about this concept of notice not always being a shield. And there's this piece around American Express and wrong number ruling. How has this shaped how call centers should be thinking about the risk mitigation in that outreach from a tech stack perspective?
Well, wrong numbers are the death of everyone in TCPA, right? The hardest case to defend as a defense attorney is a wrong number pre-recorded class action, especially if it's brought by Mike Greenwald, right? Because he's the pro, he's the best plaintiff's lawyer that there is, and he basically just brings wrong number pre-record class actions. So first thing you should be thinking about is if you're a call center or you're a brand, do you really want to use pre-recorded calls IVR, AI outbound outreach, as we were just talking about, or ringless voicemails, right? If you're using any of that technology, understand, like you're instantly in the regulated technology provision, right? You're in the high risk provisions. If you're going to be in the high risk provisions, you have to have valid express written consent. You know that, right? But the problem is that many times you'll get a wrong number. Somebody will fat finger a number. Somebody will just give you a fake damn number, right? Or a number will change hands. In any of those instances, understand you as the caller, you as the brand are liable. It is strict liability. You do not get to wait until you find out that you're calling a wrong number. You are instantly on the hook as soon as you attempt that call to a number that you did not get from the right person or who gave you the wrong number. So, what does that mean? Again, that means you want to reconsider using high-risk technology in some places. You want to make sure that your cadences are such that you're not just hammering people within the first couple of days before you have a chance to find out that you might be calling a wrong number. And most importantly, in my view, is you're going to want to be using the reassigned number database when practical. Now, if you are in the live lead game, then, that phone number is not going to change hands in, the 30 days that you're calling it or in the, 2 weeks or 1 week that you're calling it. But if you are calling age leaves or you're in the, the servicing or especially the debt collection game, these numbers change hands and you might be calling somebody, well, you got the number 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. Or if you've got, for instance, going back to the text club, you might get, as a retailer, you might have somebody enroll in your text club 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. If you're not checking out the reassigned number database every 30 days, you could be sending millions of messages or calls to phone numbers that have changed hands. And again, you are liable for those. That's $500 per. You do not want to mess around with that, especially not with guys like Greenwald out there. As I told you, mercifully, Greenwald is semi-retired and he just likes to fish these days. So you're seeing a lot less volume from him. But, the other plaintiffs' lawyers are kind of picking up where he's left off. And that guy's undefeated in class cert. I mean, I beat him a couple of times pre-certification, but nobody has beat him in certification. Now, he hasn't gone to battle against me on certification yet, but he's beat everybody else, right? So, this is not a game you want to play. You want to make sure you're doing this right. And there's other tips and tricks, too, I'm not going to give you publicly in terms of kind of how you're handling your data that can make it more challenging for these lawyers to be successful in these cases. But you can give me a call about that separate.
Well, I know that we could probably talk forever on these topics, and I want to end with one piece around stuff that has nothing to do per se with the law and your role in it. When you're not working, whenever that is, what are you doing to disconnect, to stay refreshed, recharged, hobbies, things that you like to do, extracurricular? What does that look like?
I don't really have any. Again, I think I'm very blessed in the sense that I get a lot of enjoyment and energy from work. I love my job, and my work is multifaceted in the sense that I'm blogging, I'm marketing, I'm running a business, I'm teaching young lawyers to be better lawyers in addition to actually doing the legal work and taking care of my clients. So it's kind of like I'm not just doing one thing all day, so I feel like I can just kind of shift gears and then just shift gears. And if I'm burnt out writing a brief, I can go to LinkedIn real quick and mess around for a few minutes and then come back and maybe go tutor somebody on how to take a deposition real quick and then come back and work. So, my brain is satisfied on a lot of levels. I when I'm not working, and understand, I basically live 2 lives because I'm a dad, right? And I've got, I'm a divorced dad. So I've got my kids half the time. And when I have, and it's not really half the time, it's like maybe 40% of the time. When I have my kids, I try really, really hard not to work. I suck at it. I still work. I'm not going to lie to you. But I try. I really try to be present for the kids and play games with them, baseball. I coach their little league. We invent games where we just kick balls at each other, whatever. I try to be present with the kids. I don't know how recharging that is, because to be honest with you, that takes a lot of my mental energy. I take it seriously. I tell myself sometimes it's pretend your kids are your clients, right? And deliver the way you would for your clients in this moment. So I kind of force myself to be very focused, but that's it. I have no social life. I don't have friends. I don't pretend to want to have friends, right? It's I'm working or I'm with my kids, and that's about it.
Well, you said it earlier. You love what you do.
That's true.
And when you're with your kids, you're trying to be present. right? And I'm sure those are moments that your kids probably would say are important to them, that you are at least trying to be present. And I get it, the idea of you don't always succeed at that. Sometimes you're always still on the grind to get stuff done. So with that said, we do end the show with a tradition around, if you could leave one big question for the next guest, what would you ask them?
Oh, I don't know, man. I'm not great at that stuff. I will say, people ask me this, like if you could give advice to yourself when you were younger, or, who do you listen to? Whose advice do you take? My problem is, man, I never take advice from anybody, and I never have. And I just kind of, clamor through life and make my own failures and enjoy my own successes. And I don't know, man. If I could leave a question for the next person, it would probably just be like, how you doing today? Like I don't have anything deep or meaningful.
Well, I don't know that it needs to be, right? A lot of times it's the way we see life. And, with that, I'm sure there's going to be people that want to connect with you, right? That you vibed with it on the law side, or even just being able to engage on the things that you're an expert in. So with that said, Eric, how do they best get a hold of you?
Oh, yeah. So I'm pretty easy to find, right? TCPA Czar, Eric Troutman. Visit troutmanamin.com, tcpaworld.com, our YouTube channel, @DeserveToWin, LinkedIn, Eric J. Troutman. I'm pretty easy to find. But shoot me. But ultimately, all communication channels with me are back to email. I don't text people. And that's not true. Sometimes I hate texting. I don't like talking on the phone. Video engagement's great, but email is the way I communicate. So Troutman at troutmanamin.com, but you can find that on the web.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thanks so much for joining the show. Appreciate you coming on. And obviously for those that were listening today, thanks so much. Obviously, if you love it, subscribe, and we'll see you next month. I'm Christian Montes, and thanks for listening.
Good show. See you, man.
Thank you for joining me in this episode. If you're loving the content, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your YouTube channel for exclusive clips, webinars, workshops, and bonus materials. And if you're an Apple iTunes listener, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star rating and review to help spread the word. On our YouTube page, you can also leave us feedback, comments, and suggest future guests that you'd like to hear from. For even more valuable insights and information on the call center world, visit NobelBiz.com and access our on-demand webinars. I'm Christian Montes, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of First Contact Podcast. Stay with us for the next exciting chapter.